Today, we're going to dig into this really fascinating and honestly kind of provocative article by Sergio Darpa. It basically questions the entire foundation of what we think of as digital health. The whole idea is that we might be spending all our time, all our money, solving the completely wrong problems. Okay, so let me ask you, what do you think is the most pressing topic in digital health? Your mind probably jumps to something super high-tech, right? Like AI that can diagnose diseases, or gene editing, maybe some new wearable that can predict a heart attack. You're thinking of the future. But get this, for a room packed with Italy's top experts, the answer was, well, something else, something way different.
Yep, hand washing. At a super high-level conference on digital health and telemedicine, the main event, the big central topic of conversation, was the importance of washing your hands. And this, right here, is the jumping-off point for a radical rethinking of where this whole industry is headed.
Now, to really understand why on earth hand washing was the main topic, we have to go to the conference itself, an event the author describes as just completely surreal.
Look, this wasn't some small-town meeting. This was in Rome. It was hosted by the Italian Association for Digital Health and Telemedicine. We're talking multiple government ministries involved. These are the top minds in the field, all gathered together to seriously, earnestly discuss hand hygiene. The author literally thought he'd stumbled onto some kind of hidden camera show. He hadn't.
So you're probably thinking, okay, there must be some kind of logic to this. And, well, there is. But as the author points out, it's a logic that comes from a fundamentally old and, you could argue, flawed point of view.
Their starting point is a very real, very serious problem. You see, hospital-acquired infections are a total catastrophe. They cause a huge number of preventable deaths, and they cost our healthcare systems billions. So the desire to fix this, that's absolutely valid.
But their thought process is so incremental. So step 1, acknowledge this massive infection crisis. Okay, step 2, monitor the resources we use to fight it. Things like disinfectants and staff. And from that perspective, what's the logical next step? Step 3, use technology to monitor the human behavior causing the problem. In this case, who is and who isn't washing their hands. It seems logical, right? But it's a trap.
And this is the absolute crucial point. The author says, look, if you start from that old way of thinking, yeah, the reasoning holds up, but it's completely fundamentally wrong. It's like trying to perfect a system that should just be obsolete.
So, if that's the wrong approach, what's the right one? DARPA argues we need to stop looking at the future from the outside in, and we need to start thinking from within it. And that involves two technologies that are just total game changers.
Okay, the first piece of this incredible puzzle is the digital twin. I want you to imagine a perfect virtual replica of yourself, one that's constantly being updated with all your health data. Now, scale that up. These models could predict health crises for a whole population before they even happen. That means we could have preventative care that, today, we could only dream of.
So what's the actual impact of something like this? With the predictive power of digital twins, the author projects that hospital admissions could just plummet by 70%. 70%. Just let that sink in for a second and think about it. If you're not in the hospital to begin with, what's your risk of getting a hospital-acquired infection? It's zero. Gone.
All right, but some people will still need hospital care. Of course. That brings us to the second technology that completely changes the equation: care robots. And hey, this isn't science fiction. Mass production is literally slated to begin.
And the economics behind them are just stunning. A robot costs about $40,000, which is roughly the annual salary for a care worker in a country like Italy. That means it pays for itself in just 4 months. And here is the key part. They can be disinfected automatically and perfectly every single time. No mistakes.
So what does that mean for the infections happening inside the hospital? You guessed it. Another massive drop. The author projects that if you replace 70% of human assistants with perfectly sterile robots, you would cut the remaining infections by another 70%.
And when you put these two revolutionary ideas together, you get this number, a 91% total reduction in infections. First, you get 70% fewer people in the hospital, period. And then, for the few who are there, you cut infections by another 70%. All without ever, not once, having a discussion about monitoring hand washing.
So you see, the real point here isn't just about cool robots and AI. It's about a fundamental difference in perspective. It all comes down to where you're standing when you try to solve a problem.
The author has this brilliant analogy to explain this. He says the old way of thinking is like standing outside a car dealership, arguing for hours about what color the car should be. You're just debating the paint job. But the new point of view? That's like already being in the car, driving it, on a road trip, actually using it to go somewhere new. See the difference? The people at that conference were stuck outside, arguing about the paint color, while this whole new way of doing things was already on the highway. But here's what's so fascinating. Even in that black and white conference, as the author calls it, there were a couple of flashes of color. Two speakers who were already thinking from this new, totally interconnected perspective. The first was an ornithologist, a bird expert. She explained that closing borders during a pandemic is pretty much useless. Why? Because we have somewhere between 50 and 70 billion birds migrating every year. And some of them, she says, are basically flying rats, just constant carriers of disease. She was seeing the big systemic picture, not just the tiny human-level problem in front of her.
And the second speaker took that same big-picture view and applied it to nutrition. She argued that we have to think beyond just what we eat and focus on what our food eats. It's about the health of the entire chain. You know, for DARPA's team, the key marker for health is sleep. But for her, looking at this whole system, the #1 marker was even more fundamental: the quantity and quality of water.
Both of these thinkers were looking at health not as a series of isolated problems you just have to fix one by one, but as this complex, interconnected system that you need to optimize. And that brings us to the author's final, really powerful conclusion. So how do you really fight the next pandemic? You don't do it with better surveillance or by closing borders faster. You do it by building a population that is resilient from the ground up. You do it with a digital twin for every single person, one that is optimizing their body's performance and strengthening their immune system in a way that is truly, truly preventative.
And all of this leaves us with this final, really critical question. Are we focusing all our energy, all our brain power, and billions of dollars on perfecting a system of medicine that really belongs to the past? Are we meticulously polishing the horse-drawn carriage while the car's already waiting, gassed up and ready to take us to a completely new destination?